What's up everyone, Justin Peters here. Welcome to my channel. This channel is dedicated to giving you the tips that you need to move, feel, and look better, both mentally and physically. If that sounds like something that you enjoy, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Today we are talking about the Oura Ring versus the Whoop Band. These are two wearables that I've used for the past couple years, so I wanted to break down the pros and cons of both and how they compare. Alright, so the Oura Generation 3 versus the Whoop 4.0. I've had the Oura Ring since about 2016, had the Generation 2, and I've now had the Generation 3 for a couple of months. As for the Whoop, I've had that since about 2018, and I just recently got the 4.0 about 2 months ago as well. I've put both of these to the test with some hardcore training leading up to 3 half Ironmans last year, and I've been really able to understand the differences between the two, so hope you guys can come along for the journey and let me break those down for you. All right, so a little background information. Let's just talk about how kind of the models of these products work. So the Oura Ring is a one-time payment of either $299 up to $399 for the ring itself. So far, they have made their platform free, but I guess more recently they're going to start charging $5 or something a month for that use of the platform. As for the Whoop is $30 per month. If you prepay annually or every 6 months, I think you get a little bit of a discount. It's more like $18 or something a month. And then they give you the band itself technically for free. So it's a little bit more like you pay to use the program itself. What do they track? So for the Oura, it tracks sleep, readiness, and activity. And for the Whoop Band, it tracks sleep, recovery, and then strain, which is basically the equivalent of activity. So I want to go ahead and break down kind of each of those categories and talk about the pros and cons of both the Oura and the Whoop respectively. So let's start with sleep. So for sleep, what does the Oura track? So the Oura tracks total sleep, efficiency of your sleep, restfulness, REM and deep sleep, light sleep, timing of sleep, and then the latency of sleep, which means how fast you actually fall asleep. As for the Whoop, it tracks basically the same metrics, except instead of tracking restfulness, it calls it sleep disturbances. So it's just the opposite of that. So I want to break down kind of the pros and cons of both the Oura and the Whoop in terms of sleep. So pros for sleep for the Oura, I think the accuracy is unmatched. I've had this now for about 5 years. So the Generation 2 was good, but I think they've really stepped it up in the Generation 3. I've really noticed that the numbers seem to be pretty spot on. It's definitely more comfortable to wear than the Whoop. Just a small ring, you slip it on. I don't even actually wear mine typically throughout the day anymore. I'll just put it on right before I go to sleep. Whereas sometimes if you take a shower or something before bed, you're wearing a wet band to sleep with the Whoop. And then last but not least, for pros on the Oura, I think that the tables are really easy to kind of comprehend the data that you're looking at and kind of dissect when you fell asleep and your different sleep cycles, whereas Whoop is just a little bit more confusing in the interface of the app itself. As for cons for the Oura in terms of sleep, I don't think that the sleep score that it kind of calculates and gives you really reflects sometimes the raw numbers that you're seeing. So, sometimes it will really fluctuate. I'll get, say, an 85 or an 87, and if you look at exactly how much time I spent asleep and the different levels of REM and deep, they might be very similar, but then one day it's going to give me an 83 and the next day it's going to give me an 87 or a 77. It just doesn't seem to necessarily reflect kind of what the actual raw data says. So that's probably my only con for the Oura. In terms of the Whoop, the pros that I have is Whoop really starts to learn who you are at a very early stage in actually wearing it, and I think that that's probably the best overall feature of the Whoop in comparison to the Oura. I'll go into that a little bit further later, but it really starts to learn kind of your metrics in terms of sleep and starts to really track in how much sleep you need based on like the strain you're acquiring and your performance and everything too. So it just learns a little bit more about you quicker, and then therefore it kind of tailors your sleep goals to your performance accordingly. So the app also, again, kind of learns your metrics, and then it tailors like your strain and all that kind of based on how much sleep you got the night before. So I think it just constantly is learning about you, whereas the Oura might give you a little bit less of those kind of personalized features that the Whoop does. I also love the community features on the Whoop as well. There's places where you can share your data with people and create groups and things of that nature that I'll talk about a little bit later as well. But in sleep in particular, you can share your sleep metrics from the next day on like a photo or something on social media, so you can give your community a little insight as to what you're looking at when you're sleeping and stuff too. So some of the cons I have for Whoop is that it's bulky. Again, like I just said, it's just another thing to wear on your wrist. I do a lot of triathlon training, so I have my Garmin watch, and then of course with the Whoop is just another thing to wear on the opposite wrist, so it gets a little bit bulky, especially at night. If you sleep on your side or something, sometimes you can kind of just get annoying to have it on your wrist or whatever. The resting heart rate on the Whoop doesn't seem to be correct. That's just a personal thing. It seems like my heart rate is always about 10 beats higher than it normally would be, like if I use either a heart rate monitor or on the Oura. So that's just something that I don't know if that is across the board, but definitely something that I've noticed personally during sleep. So that's pretty much all the cons that I have in the Whoop versus the Oura. I still think that the Oura probably comes out on top in terms of sleep. But let's go ahead and move on to activity. The Oura calls it activity, and then Whoop calls it strain score. And just flat out, the Whoop absolutely takes Oura in this category. This is probably the only reason that I continue to have the Whoop instead of just the Oura, is that I really think that it gives you a much better picture of who you are as an athlete and kind of the strain that you're accumulating, and then creates the recovery, which we'll talk about next, based on kind of the strain that you've accumulated. So I'll go through the Oura pros and cons first, and we'll go through the Whoop pros and cons next. So pros for the Oura, I really think it only comes down to probably step count. It's nice, it tracks your step count and maybe some activities, but I haven't really seen the activity tracking to be that great. I think that they're coming out with some updates here in 2022, a little bit later on, but they've kept pushing it back. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what they introduce. But apparently they're getting better. So that's really my only pro for the Oura. In terms of cons, I've had a gripe with this for a long time. So based on maybe some metrics that you plug in early on, like your height and your weight and kind of what your goals are in the Oura, it will give you some, what I believe to be really arbitrary calorie goals to hit in terms of activity. So for example, it'll give me maybe 500 calories to hit that day, and anyone that trains triathlon or is a hardcore fitness enthusiast or something knows that 500 calories is a pretty low calorie goal. So what will happen is, if I say do 2,000 calories worth of exercise or something on a big Saturday or a big Sunday, the next day it will be like, wow, you really exceeded your calorie goal limit, like you need to slow down, when really your recovery metrics might not match that. So it doesn't really learn who you are. The goals always stay 500 or 350 if you've had a rough night, and maybe the highest you'll get is 700. But if you do a lot of exercise, you're going to blow those calorie goals out of the water, and therefore it's just not going to really give you a great overlook of your recovery and kind of the metrics associated with that. So that's definitely my biggest gripe. I reached out to Oura like a few years back saying this needs to be changed, and they have yet to do that, but Whoop, which we'll talk about in a second, definitely has nailed that one. So let's go ahead and talk about the Whoop. The Whoop calls their activity tracking strain score, and I really have been putting this one to the test and really found it to be pretty reflective of your kind of perceived effort. I use it obviously in a lot of the cardio that I've been doing, training for triathlons and stuff. So you actually, in the app itself, you'll start an activity. You can see your live heart rate. I found the heart rate to be pretty good, but I wear a chest strap a lot of times along with the Garmin, and sometimes the heart rate on the wrist just doesn't necessarily match what your actual heart rate is. So that's a little bit of a gripe, but I still feel that it does match it pretty well. So I'll say that the data is pretty reflective of your perceived effort. Another great thing about the Whoop is that it kind of slowly learns as you continue to program in activities. Or say swimming is a great example for this one, where I don't even need to start the activity of swimming anymore. It will just go ahead and know that at that particular time I started swimming, because it just kind of feels the movement of swimming, and it actually starts to learn what that movement feels like. So after a certain amount of time, running is another example, the Whoop kind of learns what these movements feel like on you, and then therefore it will just kind of like 30 minutes later it'll be like, oh, a strain has been detected or an activity has been detected, and then you go in and program it. So that's kind of nice. You don't have to actually like start it every time. And it's definitely a feature that I enjoy, especially with like swimming. You know, you won't remember when you're getting in the pool to start the activity, but when you're driving home from the pool, suddenly you'll just get a notification that, you know, an activity has been detected, and your strain kind of updates accordingly. And then what's great, I think probably the best feature about Oura, again, is that it learns who you are. And I think that this is, especially for any fitness enthusiast, this is super important, because someone's strain might be entirely different than someone else's. And so, for example, you know, you'll have two athletes that both go out and do a 30-minute run. If one athlete does that run every single day, Whoop knows that like it gets pretty used to that run, so you might only accumulate, you know, a 7 on strain score, whereas the other athlete that doesn't run that often might go up to a 14 under the same activity. And whereas Oura just gives you kind of the same numbers across the board, arbitrary 700 goal for the day, Whoop really learns who you are and then adjust your strain accordingly. So two people doing the exact same exercise based on their fitness level and how much strain they accumulate day upon day, it really learns and then adjusts accordingly. So I love that feature on the Whoop, and that's definitely the reason why I still have it today. So as for the cons, in terms of strain score on Whoop, the band drives me crazy. I do a lot of kettlebell work, and it just happens to be right on the wrist, right kind of where you will hold the kettlebell on the rack and things of that nature. So you got to flip it over. It's a little frustrating, a little annoying. It's another thing too to get tan lines. You know, I have terrible tan lines from running and doing a lot of triathlon training, running outdoors, of things of that nature. So it's just another thing to be on the wrist. Strain, like I said earlier, it can be a little bit off if you're doing like weightlifting versus cardio. Like I said, you know, a zone 2 run and a heavy squat session might not reflect the same, and your body might be so much more beat up after the weightlifting session, but your strain is going to be higher after the cardio session, just based on kind of how they judge the strain, which seems to be all reflective of heart rate. So again, I don't exactly know how they change that. Maybe they can adjust it based on the activity, but sometimes it's not really reflective necessarily of, you know, how beat up you feel. I really wish that Whoop would make a heart rate strap. Again, I have a gripe because I do wear heart rate straps all the time and track with my Garmin when I'm doing more triathlon-based training, and I'll look at the Whoop to kind of see how it compares to the heart rate. Sometimes it can be up to 30 beats off based on the wrist, and they've done studies on this, and the wrist doesn't really seem to be that accurate of a place to track heart rate. The chest strap is still the gold standard, so it would be nice. I know that Whoop has been coming out with different places to put the Whoop band. Like I think they have a bicep strap, and they even did some boxers where it's in like the cufflink of the boxers. So that's interesting, but I still feel that they're missing the boat if they don't have a heart rate strap that tracks kind of the exact heart rate that you're accumulating. So hopefully they'll have that coming out in the future. And then, yeah, because the wrist is just not the best place, you know, sometimes your data can be skewed a little bit, but I still think it's pretty good. Last but not least, let's go ahead and talk about readiness versus recovery. So Oura calls it readiness and Whoop calls it recovery. So what does the Oura track? The Oura tracks resting heart rate. It tracks HRV, which is heart rate variability, body temperature, recovery index, which is kind of how soon in the night your heart rate stabilizes and reaches its lowest point, sleep balance, and activity balance. Whoop claims that their score is based on HRV, resting heart rate, respiratory rate, and then hours of sleep. Let's go through the pros and cons of Oura first. So I really think that the app interface with Oura with respect to readiness is pretty good. You have your raw data right there. It shows your respiratory rate, shows your resting heart rate, your HRV raw numbers, kind of the average throughout the night. You can scroll down and you can see exactly what your heart rate did all night, as well as your HRV. So that's just really user-friendly right there in your face. So that's a huge pro for me. I like the recovery index feature where you can see kind of at what point your heart rate stabilized during the night. So for example, if you have like some alcohol or something, you'll see your heart rate will stabilize way later in the night, 3, 4 in the morning, versus like if you got an earlier meal and went to sleep and it stabilized within the first couple hours. So ideally you wanted to stabilize in the first couple hours. So I like that feature. And then it gives you, Oura gives you like these daily insights. Sometimes they reflect kind of how you're feeling or whatever. I think some people might get into those. I ignore most of the time, but they do give you kind of a helpful little insight, like take it easy today, like your heart rate took X amount of time to stabilize. So they just give these little insights that might be helpful for some people. In terms of cons, I don't think that the readiness score that Oura gives you is reflective at all of your actual readiness based on raw data. So as you wear the Oura, you'll get to understand kind of what your base numbers are, and say, for example, your HRV is typically 85 or something like that, then you'll know that if your HRV is 65, you're probably a little bit of under recovered, and so you should maybe take the day off. Whereas Oura might not really give you a readiness score that's kind of reflective of those numbers. I've always found the readiness to be a little bit off, and sometimes it's wildly off. So I always just really kind of zero in on my raw data, and then just kind of know your numbers, and then make a decision on how hard you want to train based on those numbers. It also doesn't learn who you are, so that's the huge thing that I think has been the overall theme of the difference, is that the algorithm in Whoop and learning who you are as an individual and what your fitness levels and how much strain you accumulate is a huge negative factor on Oura, because it really, again, gives you these arbitrary goals, and if you exceed them, then the next day it's going to tell you, wow, you really exceeded those goals, you need to slow down, when it might just be a regular Saturday or a regular Tuesday of fitness for you. So that's another gripe that I have with Oura. In terms of the pros and cons of Whoop, so the pros, the recovery I feel like is much more on point than Oura, the score that they actually give you. So they give you a percentage out of 100, kind of how recovered you are, and it's like either red, yellow, or green based on that. So it's always exciting to see if you're in the green or in the yellow or in the red sometimes, and then base your training off that accordingly. Whoop says that they use all these things like HRV, resting heart rate, respiratory rate, and stuff to calculate into that formula. I really think that it comes down to HRV. It seems like the HRV is the metric that really moves the needle in terms of how recovered you are, because my respiratory rate won't change that much. Resting heart rate doesn't really change that much, but really if my HRV is either up or down, it really seems to fluctuate that number accordingly. So another thing that I enjoy about the pros for Whoop is that the community is amazing. I love the community. I love being able to see, if you have a group, for example, I created a group, I'll throw that down in the description, but it's really fun to kind of challenge your friends and just have a little bit of healthy competition to see who's recovered, what people's sleep is looking like and what their fitness is looking like. So I love the community feature that Whoop offers. Oura is like starting to do like some share features and whatnot, but they have nothing like that in terms of community. So that's another huge pro for me. You can easily put your recovery and your metrics and stuff on like a photo, share it on social, so that people can kind of see like where you stand and how your recovery is looking, which has been cool for me during these builds where I get a lot of questions, regarding training and stuff for these Ironman events. So that's been fun. In terms of cons for the Whoop, again, it seems like HRV is the biggest metric, so it kind of depends. If you feel good otherwise, but your HRV is a little bit lower than normal, say if you had a heavy like deadlifting day and you want to go out and do some cardio or something, it might tell you that you need to recover, that you have a low score that day, when you might still feel decent and should go out. So I think, I don't know, it just kind of depends on what you personal and how you feel, but it seems like HRV is really the metric they focus on the most. Another thing is that, because of the inaccuracy potentially of the wrist data, I don't know exactly how reflective that is of your actual HRV. I think that the finger is probably still more accurate with respect to heart rate and then therefore HRV. So just the fact that it's on the wrist, who knows if that data is reflective. Like I said, the resting heart rate for me seems to be a little bit off on the Whoop, so that's one of my other cons. Just some miscellaneous things that I threw in here. So Oura is starting to do a little bit more of like these explore features, so you can like add like a workout after the fact. You can also do like these guided meditations, guiding breathing, these things in the explore tab, so that's brand new. I haven't really played around with it a lot, but it seems like there's some breathing and some things in there that might be helpful like throughout the day if you're feeling stressed or whatever, to kind of recenter yourself. So that's a cool feature that Oura just added. Whoop, obviously the community feature, I'm loving it. I have a group, I have other groups that I've joined, and it's just cool to see kind of where you stand and how many beasts there are out there that are just getting after it on a daily basis. So love that community feature. Who are these best for? So the Oura, and I've got this question many times, the Oura is going to be best for kind of just your average person who is not necessarily a fitness enthusiast but really wants to learn about their sleep data, does some activity, but that isn't like the focus of their day or their focus of their week, and just wants to better themselves by being able to get this data and then make decisions based on that data. So really someone that doesn't care about fitness as much and just wants more of their sleep information. Also doesn't want to pay like the $30 or $18 or whatever it is as a monthly fee, just wants it up front, obviously doesn't want like the bulky thing on their wrist, so just wants a ring that, I think that the Oura Ring looks pretty cool, especially if you get, one of the cool colors. So it can be almost a plus instead of the Whoop is really hard to make it look cool. So in terms of Whoop itself, who is the Whoop best for? I think Whoop is definitely best for your athlete or fitness enthusiast. Someone like me, for example, I love the Whoop because, again, it learns who you are over time, and it based your strain, your recovery, all those metrics off of who you are as an individual and how hard that you actually train. So I think it's much more reflective of your actual recovery, your actual sleep need, and then your actual strain that you're accumulating. And it's really nice to see a feature like that. I love the community as well. So anyone that's looking for a fitness community that's online that you're able to share data and stuff with too, I think that's a great feature. Right, so let's go ahead and do a little quick review head to head on each category. I think Oura is much better for tracking sleep. If that's your main goal, I think Oura is definitely the direction you want to go. The app is super user friendly. I think the metrics are spot on. And if that's kind of what your goals are, to get sleep dialed in, I think the Oura is definitely a winner in that category. Whoop is much better in my opinion for recovery. I think because the Whoop learns who you are, learns to base the strain off what kind of athlete that you are. Therefore your recovery is much more reflective of like your actual recovery than the Oura is. And then last but not least, I think Whoop is leaps and bounds better than the Oura with respect to activity tracking. This is the reason why I continue to pay for the Whoop. I love the activity tracking. I love the online community feature where you can kind of challenge your friends and engage in some healthy competition online just to see where everyone is with their fitness. I love that feature, and definitely a reason why I continue to pay for the Whoop. So there you have it. That's them head to head, both the Oura Generation 3 and the Whoop 4.0. If you want to go ahead and try those out, I'll throw a link down below where you get a free month of the Whoop at the link, and then I'll also throw another link where you get $50 off the Oura if you want to give the Oura a shot. Thanks again for coming along on this journey. It's been fun. I'll have a lot more content like this coming out in the near future. If you enjoy this type of content, go ahead and hit subscribe below, and I'll see you in the next video.